form a pay structure that should support the organization strategy, support the workflow. That is, in any organization, there's a workflow from inputs, transformation, and output. It can be a product, it can be a good, it can be a service. There are some inputs, transformation, and output. So there's a workflow. So the pay structure that you are developing should support that workflow. That is, it should facilitate proper workflow. Then it should support fairness. Your pay structure should be fair by all the employees. And it should, which means it should not be a hindrance or a demotivator when it comes to employees. And it should also motivate the behavior towards achieving organizational objectives. That is, now you set your KPIs, you have your KPIs, the organizational KPIs, and they are cascaded down to departmental KPIs, and they are further cascaded down to the individual KPIs. And when the pay structure is designed, the pay structure should support or should motivate employees to show behavior that would achieve these KPIs, these objectives. It can be through incentive schemes, it can be through other motivators, different methods can be used. But at the end of the day, your pay structure should motivate employee behavior towards achieving the objectives. Because what we always say is, you get more of what you reward. You get more of what you reward. So unless you reward the right thing, until you reward what you expect to increase, you will not get the desired outcome from these pay structures. There can be various examples. There are few which I have read in textbooks. One to do with one of these courier companies. They observed that at the end of the shift, a substantial amount of items that were supposed to be delivered within the day were returned back to base so that they go to the next day's list. So the management looked at it and they thought, okay, this is not going to be something that customers are going to like. Customers want the items to be delivered on the day that it was promised. So they devised a pay structure, an incentive scheme, which was linked to the percentage of undelivered items. Lesser the percentage, higher the incentive. So they thought rewarding the delivery guys for lesser number of undelivered packages would motivate them to work that much harder to deliver the packages. That was the whole idea. So they implemented this, and immediately the percentage of returned items dropped. They were very happy. So that they thought, okay, our new pay structure or the pay strategy has worked. Now they are working so that much harder to make sure the items are delivered. So it went on for a couple of weeks. Then gradually some complaints started to happen that some items were damaged. Some were just dropped on their doorstep. So things like that. So then they analyzed what is going on. And after some investigation, they realized because the delivery guys, their target was to reduce the number of returned items, undelivered items. Say you go to a place and the place is closed. You can't deliver. So what do? You just leave it and maybe put a fourth signature or whatever and come back, saying that it was delivered. And maybe sometimes the gate was closed. So they might throw dropped drastically. Why? Because the motivation, though the pay structure was not directly linked to the organizational objectives. In any organization, customer satisfaction is at the top, right? So in this case, they compromised customer satisfaction for something else. So when you are designing your pay structure, it is critically important towards organizational objectives. There's another example. This is one of these fast food chains. So again, when they were doing an audit, they found that at the end of the shift, say by 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock when they close, there were a lot of leftover items, because some of these items in the menu are pre-cooked. They only do the final preparation and serve it, because the preparation takes a bit longer. So you can't start preparing it once you get the order. So at least partly prepared item has to be there. So that was the practice. So then they realized at the end of the shift, a lot of these partly prepared items were leftovers. So they designed again incentive scheme or a pay structure for the staff to be rewarded for lesser amount of leftovers. Lesser the amount of leftovers, they got some sort of an incentive, just to make sure that the cost is reduced. Then again, this was implemented, and within few days, they were very happy. The leftovers were going down drastically. That's what, because their first objective was met. Then again, like the previous one, after a couple of days, complaints started to come, saying that when you go to the outlet at 10:30, they don't have food. When you go there at 11 o'clock, no food. So then they try to analyze what has happened. So again, what they have done is to make sure that there are less leftovers, they started preparing less. So whenever a customer comes at 11:30 and orders that particular item, they don't have the pre-cook because they have prepared less, to make sure there are no leftovers. Right? So do you see the problems that might arise when you try to incorporate pay structures or some incentive scheme that doesn't tally with the objectives? I think last week I mentioned to you about this additional payments for engineers based on the number of hours worked. So the objective was to compensate the engineers for hours, not for work contribution or achieving targets. So not like that, just for the number of hours. So then you get different or undesired behaviors, because you get more but you reward. When you reward more hours, you get more hours. Not if that is not what you want, obviously that's not what you want, right? You don't want to have more hours, you want to have results achieved. And in the first example I mentioned today, the objective was, the end objective was not to reduce the number of undelivered items, but to make sure the customer gets the item safely and undamaged and on time. That was the objective. But the reward was for something else. You get that behavior. In the second example, the objective of the organization was not to have customers dissatisfied because they don't have the item that they want to order. What they wanted is to reduce the amount of leftovers. Therefore, you need to be very careful in what is identifying what behavior you want in the employees and reward that. So that is motivator. So first you identify what are the what's the final objective of this particular exercise. Then what are the behaviors that would lead to that particular objective and how to motivate that behavior. That is very important. Then what is pay structure? A pay structure refers to the array of pay rates for different work, that is jobs, skills or competencies within a single organization. That is the pay structure. Now there's another term that we use called the employment structure. Employment structure is something where we allocate some grades and classes and levels to these jobs or skills or competencies. That is the job structure. So you might say, you have now in our organization we have A to F. G would be the office assistants, non-staff categories, and the T staff and cleaning staff and so on. Then F is the junior executive level, entry level. You might have some trainees, you might have just executives without any experience and so on. Then E, D, C, B, and going up to A, where you have the directors and the general managers and so on. So that's an employment structure. So that's different. And when you link the pay rates to those grades, it becomes a pay structure. Okay? The pay structure also will have these grades. So grade A, level 1 will have a range from 200,000 to 500,000, something like that. So when you link both the grades with the pay, it becomes a pay structure. And how does these pay rates are determined? Yes, of course, it is based on qualifications. Now, coming from a background where we sort of pay a lot of emphasis on qualifications, I tend to look for qualifications because in Sri Lanka, we value that so much. So we can't, it's difficult for us to disregard the qualifications. But my experience working with the Chinese is very different. And yesterday, we were interviewing for a HR manager position. So this guy came who had the PQHRM and some other HR qualifications. And I knew this guy. So when I was speaking to him, he said, okay, so I don't have a master's, I don't have a academic qualification in HR. Will that be a problem? I said, absolutely not. You just come in and answer the questions that he asks. So we had the interview for about 40 minutes. And not even a single time did my Chinese colleague mention about qualifications. He asked about what are your experiences in your role, in your position as assistant manager at this organization. What are the functions you perform in HR? And he gave scenarios. Now, this is a multinational. How will you adapt yourself to this? And this is in a different industry. How would you adapt to this industry? Those were the questions, not a single question on qualification. But being Sri Lankans, we tend to pay attention. And sometimes when I get engineers, especially with fresh graduates, without even looking at the degree certificate, I ask for two other education-related things. I ask, what was your score for A-levels general knowledge and general English? I ask those two because I have come across engineers with upper second and even first class. who had 30, 40 marks for English and maybe 40, 50 marks for general knowledge. So there's a problem there for me. Because that first class will give you the technical know-hows to design a structure. That is what you get from the first class in uni. But the general knowledge and the general English score will be a better indicator of how this person would match or how that person can gel into a work setting. So yes, academic and professional qualification, because otherwise you can't have a structure without bringing this in. I think in all your organizations, you might have to go from grade D to C, you have to have a degree. Unless you have a degree, you are stuck at D. You can't go to C, something like that. So yes, you bring those things. And in terms of the professions like accounting and now even HR, because we have the charter qualification now, and even legal attorneys. So you can bring in those professional qualifications into your pay structure. Then knowledge and skills involved, which means there are two sides to it. One is the knowledge and skills possessed by the employee. Actually, there are three sides to it. The knowledge and skills that are possessed by the employee, the knowledge and skills that are required by that position, and the difficulty in obtaining that knowledge and skill. Now, let me explain those three different aspects. One is what you have. That is your potential. And sometimes, even I do when I evaluate a candidate, how much to offer him or her. Maybe I know for sure that this particular knowledge or skill will not be required for that particular, the position we are looking at. But I know for a fact in 3 years, for the next position in the hierarchy, that's going to be very useful. So that person has it. So we can link it to the pay grade. And the second one is, of course, what is needed for that particular task. So that's a minimum. So you need to have that. Third one is how difficult it is to obtain that particular knowledge or skill. Now, I think I shared with you, if you take a commercial pilot, the salary starts from about 2 million a month. Why? Because to obtain that knowledge and skill and the license is very expensive. So whether the job requires it, whether the person has it, or how difficult to obtain, all those three things matter. Then the value added to the company. The pay rate will be decided on that. Now, what sort of value can this person add or this position add? Now, if you take my position, the direct HR position, even though I'm not required to add that value fully, there's a lot of value I can add with my knowledge, with my experience, and with my qualifications. Maybe to develop a system which can be used in global operations, not only in Sri Lanka, but in the region, globally. Actually, we started to have this developed in-house, this very comprehensive performance management system where everything is automated. You just go and click some buttons and you get beautiful dashboards, beautiful reports. However, I'm still waiting for the approval for the budget, which is about 10, 12 million for that particular thing. But if we do that, it will not only be for Sri Lanka, not only for the region, but it can be a global thing. Because what I heard from my manager is that even at Beijing head office, they don't have something like that. So that kind of value addition can be given to the organization through a position like mine. And I initiated a program where we spoke to employees to highlight the value system of the organization. So in our organization, we have 4 core values like inclusion, dedication, integrity, and so on. So we selected a few employees who could highlight that particular value, and we got down a video team, created some videos. I did the first one, and I got some others to do the rest. And that was highly appreciated by the management. They had sent it to the head office and got some very good comments, and now they want to go to the region as well. So when that position can add value to the organization, of course, the pay rate has to be linked to that. Then impact on the operations. If it is only to that particular department, very less scope. Then to that particular SBU, slightly bigger. Then for the entire country regional operations, country operations, global operations, if you have an impact which is going beyond the SBU and into the region or in the country, then of course pay rates will be determined by that. Of course, the branch manager, a regional manager would get a higher package than the branch manager, and the country manager would get even something more, something like that. And of course, the pay rates are determined by the working conditions. That is, when you are working in very comfortable office environment, the conditions are not that difficult. But if you are in the construction project, where you are exposed to the elements, you are in the sun, exposed to dust, heat, rain, everything. So those conditions are difficult. And even inside the building, maybe you are working in a warehouse where ventilation is less, very humid, hot. So things like that. So when the working conditions are tough, and I saw that, I don't know how accurate that information is, a video somewhere in the US, there was this tower, telecom tower, which is 250 meters tall. And on the top, there's a light bulb, just to like warn the pilots, flights. So every 6 months, one guy has to climb up and replace this bulb. So according to that post, he's paid $20,000 per each climb every 6 months. That's about 6 million every 6 months. But just imagine the condition, the safety, the risk here. Of course, he has all the safety equipment, but who knows? The entire tower can fall, collapse. So those kind of working conditions, we have to compensate. And even in the construction industry, the tower crane operators, so they have to be, they are all by themselves for a minimum of 4 hours, minimum 4-hour shifts, sometimes going up to 8 hours. So very tough, difficult working conditions. So those conditions have to be compensated in addition to the normal skill and the knowledge that the person has. So these are the factors that would determine pay rates. We'll be looking at this in detail later on as well. Now, and when it comes to a pay structure, there are 3 elements, as I mentioned earlier, that you need to decide. First is the number of levels. It's 5 levels, 10 levels. Say there are 5 grades like A, B, C, D, E, and within the grade there are 5 levels, so altogether 30. So all those things, the number is the first thing you have to decide. Second thing is the differentials. What's the difference between A and B? What's the difference between A1 and A2? So differentials. It can be in terms of the basic, in terms of the gross, in terms of other benefits. Maybe A and B are entitled for free parking, Now, in my organization, we are at WTC, so it's very expensive. You have to pay about 10,000 rupees a month for parking. And grade B, A and B get a pass, a parking lot. That is their number is put into the system. And recently there was an issue. The MD, the country manager had come, his vehicle has come, and all the slots, we have about 16 or 18 slots, have been full. So then they had to revise and reduce the benefit only to grade A, because there are a lot of employees in grade B who used to park their vehicles. Then the MD had to park outside. So now it's only grade A. So things like that. So those are the differentials. Maybe whether you are, and in our organization, we have a secondment allowance, that is from one country, if requested, an employee with a particular expertise can be requested by another country for a short duration, up to 3 months. So when you are seconded from, say, from Sri Lanka, now recently our IT guy went to Maldives for a couple of days to sort out their network issues, and we pay an additional amount going up to about, I think, $80 per day. That is A, grade A. Grade B, maybe I'm just guessing, 60, 40, 30, likewise. So all those are differentials. So number of grades and how these grades differ. Thirdly, and the most difficult thing to do, first one, number of levels, very easy. Differentials, not that difficult. Criteria is what takes time. What decides where you are placing this person, whether in C1 or B2 or D4, whatever. What's the criteria? So just to give an idea about how we do it in our organization, we have two criteria. One is the JE score, other one is the QE score. Right. Yes. So the JE is the job evaluation score. When I introduced this scheme, we evaluated, at that time there were about 40 jobs. I'm talking about 2016. And based on three main categories, the mental effort, the physical effort, and the conditions, there are 8 different items which are marked on a scale of 1 to 5. Say, for example, impact. Is it within the department, within the team, department, that particular office, country? So depending on what the impact is, score of 1 to 5. So there are 8 items. So 5 into 8, maximum is 40. So we have devised, if your job evaluation score is between, say, 35 to 40, you are eligible to be in grade A. If it is 30 to 35, you are in grade B, eligible to be in grade B. So there's only one criteria, 2 criteria needs to be fulfilled. That's the first one. Second criteria is the qualification experience. So we have devised a very, I would say, basic level scoring system, starting from A level. I think O level, no. From O level also there was a score, maybe 10 or whatever. A level, then certificate, diploma, degree, then postgraduate, so on. There are different scores. I think going up to a master's would have about 70, if I'm not mistaken. Then the experience. For every year of relevant experience, we give 2 points. So if you have 10 years, that's 20 points. So again, you add it up and you get the JE's, the QE score. Again, we have said, okay, if you are, your score is above 110, you are eligible to be in grade A. If you are between 90 and 110, you are eligible to be in grade B. So there were 2 eligibilities. And we looked at both. If both are in grade A, we can easily give that person a grade A rating or a category. And within grade A, we look at, okay, Now, if the cutoff point was, say, 110 points, but he has 130 points, so maybe you can put him in A4. So that is how we decide. I'm not saying that it is very complicated or very accurate, but it serves the purpose. Because in my opinion, all these things are there to make things transparent and to make things easier for the HR department. So more complicated the system is, it's difficult for others to understand and difficult for others to support. So make it simple. So that is how we have done it. So you can devise your own method. How to have that? As I said, minimum qualification to be in grade C is to have a degree, something like that, a diploma, whatever. So the three things that you need to decide when it comes to, just hold on, when it comes to pay structure is the number of levels, the differentials, and the criteria used to determine those differences described in the structure. Right. Give me a second. Okay. There are a few messages. I just want to check whether they are urgent or not. Sorry. Right. So that's the pay structure. Now let's look at these pay differentials. Something very important. How would different jobs, skills, or competencies differ from each other? Shows the relative value given to different pay levels. You might have a pay level A and pay level B. So what are the relative values given to these two? So in terms of basic salary, B might have 200,000, A might have 300,000. That's a relative value. So the intention of having these pay differentials is to motivate people to strive for a promotion to a higher level. That's the purpose of having these differentials. Now say you are in grade B. My basic is 200,000. And I know if I somehow get to grade A, it will be 300,000. So that's a motivator for me to do my best to strive for a promotion to get to that level. But just like what I have mentioned, I think previously also about this, the mentality of entitlement mentality. So we have so many employees come to me and say, now I have been in this position for the last 8 years. Even the managers come and propose. Now he has been in this position for 5 years. Why don't you give a promotion? So in my opinion, promotions are not for people, not for non-achievers, not for people who are stagnating in their position for 5 years. I pity them. Yes, fine. But just because they are stagnating in a position for 5 years, that's not a criteria for them to be promoted. So in my opinion, there are two criteria that would make you eligible for a promotion. One is expansion of the scope. That is, your job evaluation points have increased, or your qualifications, your qualification experience score has increased. If neither of those two are present, in my opinion, yes, you can have a slight increase in your salary to compensate for the inflation, but not increment, not promotions. So when it comes to differentials, so before going to that, so you have to decide what are the criteria that would determine these different levels, because that is going to be a key motivator for your employees to progress. I can remember when I joined way back in 2014 to this organization, there was this long-serving quantity surveyor, QS, who didn't have, who had only, I think, a diploma level qualification, but he was doing the bulk of work in the tendering department. So we introduced a system where we provided the zero interest loans for their education. So he utilized that and got himself a degree from in QS from ICBT campus. And a few months ago, he was promoted as the general manager of marketing. Sorry, DGM, Deputy General Manager of Marketing Department. So we offered, okay, we created the system. Okay, if you want to move up, you have to add qualifications, not only doing your job for so many years, and you have to expand your scope as well. Then he did both. He added the degree, and now I think he's doing an MBA also. And then in terms of scope, he expanded his job, which was limited to the head office, into projects and into other countries. So both ways, he was motivated to do all these things because he saw, okay, if I do this, I can get into, would have been in D, now he's in B. So those promotions can be linked to all these things. And when it comes to pay differentials, the differences can be in terms of content and value. Now, content means the work that is performed in the job and how does it get done. So here it is depending on the skills required for the job, the complexities of the task, how complex the task is, then the problem solving and the responsibility level. So these are the content elements of the work performed. Then we have the value, the worth of the work. What is the relative contribution to the organization? What would the particular skill contribute in terms of value? So the pay differentials can be linked to both content of a job, that is the work that is performed, and also the value, the worth of that particular work. That is, now again, how this links is, if you do, now you can expand your job horizontally as well as vertically. Now say you are in finance and you are handling one particular project, the vouchers of one particular project. So horizontal expansion is you add a second project, again doing checking vouchers. You add a third project, again that is a added work, fourth project, fifth. So you are adding similar work, more of similar work. That is work performed. So amount of work, all those things comes in. But when it comes to the vertical expansion, say now you are doing the checking of vouchers in one project, and you add auditing on top of that. Then you add budgeting on top of that. So now earlier you were doing only checking. Now you added auditing and now you added budgeting. So that is vertical expansion. So there you are adding more value, worth of the work. So the quantity of work as opposed to worth of the work, two different things. Both have to be compensated. Pay differentials have to consider both. But in my opinion, for someone to climb or to be promoted, the second aspect is more important than the first one. The worth of the work that you perform. So you can have different types of structures. You can have job-based structures or person-based structures. A job-based structure relies on the work content. the task, the behaviors, responsibilities of that particular job. Whoever is doing the job is immaterial. Whether it is A, B, or C, who is doing the job is immaterial. We are looking at the job itself. That is how the structure is prepared. But you can have person-based structures as well. So in a person-based structure, we are looking at the skill, knowledge, and the competencies of the employee individual. And you are putting them into a structure based on skill levels. Now, this can be practiced very easily in the IT, the sector where you are into programming, software development. So, depending on your skills, the competencies on different programming languages. So, you can be the manager or assistant manager or executive or whatever. Here, you are not talking about the job itself. You are talking about the skills, the person. So, if the person is capable of one language, he's here. 2 languages, he's here. 3 and more, he's here. So, you link the skills, knowledge, and competencies into the structure. That is a person-based structure. And the person-based structures can be 2 types, the skill-based and the competency-based. We will look at them, I think, not today, next week. Both structures may incorporate skill, but different skills. When you are talking about job-based structures, you are talking about the skill that is needed then and there. But when it comes to a person-based structure, you are talking about the skills that the person has, irrespective of whether they use it or not. If the person is competent in 3 programming languages, yes, you are at grade A. If you know only 2 languages, you are in grade B. Whether you are using all these 3 languages is immaterial when it comes to this particular aspect of pay structures. Right, so we spoke maybe close to an hour. Any questions or clarifications? Okay, so we will now just take maybe 2-3 minutes just for me just to have a break. Maybe 3 minutes, I'll come back. So let's look at what are the forces or factors that shape the internal structure of an organization. There are, of course, economic pressures. Now, as I said, some of these factors originate in the external environment, some of them originate within the organization. So obviously, these economic pressures are coming from the external environment. So how would that shape the internal structure? Now, sometimes the economic pressure for, we say, now recently, because of the inflation, the rapid inflation and the depreciation of the dollar, we were able to negotiate an additional allowance, a distress allowance for each and every employee, because our organization, we receive the salary, the bulk, the amount in dollars from head office, and we distribute it among the employees. So when we were calculating this distress allowance, there was almost 190% depreciation of the dollar. So where the head office had to remit about 45,000 US dollars for salaries every month for head office. Now they had to remit only 25,000 US dollars because the dollar has, the rupee has depreciated. So we worked out the benefit, and for them, the rupee value is material. So for them is the dollars. So we worked out a system where a portion of that benefit the head office was enjoying because of the depreciation of the rupee to be given back to the employees as an allowance. So we call this distress allowance. So we decided on a monthly total, and then we distributed it among the grades. Then, because the economic pressures are more felt by the lower levels, we said, okay, if you up to 50,000 salary, we will pay 25,000 as this additional allowance. So 50% as their allowance. Next 50,000, 40%. Next 100,000, 30%, 20%, and going up above 400,000, I think only 3%, something like that. So that particular the calculation was very much influenced by the economic pressures, because we wanted to make sure now, say, if we gave a flat rate of say 20% allowance for everybody, so those who are getting 50,000 total salary would have got 10,000 as the allowance, and someone who's getting 800,000 would have got 4 lakhs as the allowance. It was unfair in terms of the basic economics. So the economic pressures decided or influenced the decision on the internal structure there. And of course, the government policies, laws and regulations, especially when the budgetary relief allowance was introduced in 2015 and 2016, it affected our structures. Because those who are getting less than 40,000, we have to pay some additional thing, less than 25,000 something else. So the government policies affected our internal structures. And now the tax, the income tax, is affecting our structures. Now more and more organizations are removing chunks of the pay sheet salary and giving them as reimbursements of bills. Of course, in strictly speaking, those are also taxable, but it's not in the pay sheet. They are saying, okay, we give it as a service. So there are some explanations, but we haven't resorted to any of that sort because we are a state-owned organization back in China. So it's very difficult for us to convince the management to do all these, tax evading kind of practices. But I know many organizations do that. So the government policies, laws and regulations would shape internal structures. And what about external stakeholders? Especially if you're in the manufacturing, again, especially if you are in the apparel sector, your buyers are very strong. It can be Marks and Spencer, Nike, whatever. So they are very strong. So they dictate terms to you. They might say, okay, we want to see the minimum wage of your employees is this amount of dollars per hour. We will not buy from you if it is below than that. So things like that. So the external stakeholders can affect your internal structural decisions. And what about the cultures and customs? Now, the example I gave you about the supervisors and the engineers. So the general thinking is an engineer has spent 4 years to get a degree and he has a paper qualification, so he should earn more than this O-level qualified supervisor. So those are the cultural things, the customs, the practices. And I think in the medical profession, there were some issues for nurses getting a 4-year degree. So there were proposals to start those degrees in Sri Lanka, but the GMOA very strongly opposed that because they want to keep that difference, doctor and nurse. So doctor is a 5-year degree. Okay, nurses were having diplomas. Now they are getting a 4-year degree. They're getting closer. So the doctors didn't like that. So those are the cultural and custom related, not the customs in the sense like the clearance, but the practices of a country. They affect your internal structures. And if you look at even the teachers, the teaching profession, the principals and the teachers. So all this, what they call as Vatup Vishamata, those are the things that they're talking about. They bring, okay, they compare their own industry and cross industries and say there are disparities. So one in this grade, another system in this grade should be similar. So those are cultural things. And of course, this we have discussed at length, strategy, and the overall HR policies also we have discussed at length. And now, first 4 are the external factors. Below that are the internal factors and the work design. So when it comes to the work design, it is the main things like the authority and the autonomy and the feedback you get and the skill utilization. And if you look at the Hackman-Oldham model of work design, so there are 5 elements. If you can recall that model, first one is the skill variety. Then you have task significance. Then you have task. You have autonomy. You have feedback. So there were 5. I can't remember the 5th one. So the Hackman-Oldham model of job design. So these factors would shape the internal structure of an organization. What are the skills that are needed for that particular job? Does it have high authority or low authority? Does it have task significance? Things like that are important. Then what about the internal labor market? Because the rules and procedures that determine pay for different jobs within the organization. What are the rules and procedures that are in existence? Rules and procedures that allocate employees among these different jobs. So based on what criteria do you allocate employee to grade B1 or B2? Things like that. That's internal labor market. Then employee acceptance. Again, it determines, is a source of the internal structure. The fairness, level of fairness. It can be procedural fairness or distributive fairness or justice. Procedural justice involves the process by which the decision is reached. Now, for example, you are distributing the annual bonus. So, what is the criteria to determine this particular bonus? I'll give an example. So, before the COVID, we had this practice of excellence in performance bonus in June and in March and in September. How do we do that? At the beginning of the year, we decided based on the performance of the financial performance of the organization previous year, how much can be allocated for this year's performance bonus. say we agreed on 10 million to be distributed among 50 employees. So then 5 million goes in March, 5 million goes in September. I'm describing the procedure we followed, right? Then in March, my task is to distribute this 5 million among these 50 employees who are in, say, 7 departments. Now, all of you who are in HR would know how much you try, how much you emphasize on being objective. Different managers have their own perspective. So it is very difficult to compare the A grade received from manager X to an A grade received from manager Y. You know that because manager X will have a different perspective of what an A grade employee is, and manager Y will have a different perspective of who a grade A employee is. So based on those differences, it's difficult to compare across all departments. So what I decided was to go with different departments. So the different managers within the department, he's doing all the evaluations now, the appraisals. So then he will have the same yardstick. But in the other department, the manager will have a different yardstick. First might be measuring in meters. Now this guy is measuring in feet. But no issue as long as he's measuring all the 7 employees under him. So likewise, I wanted to make a difference or differentiate between different managers, which meant distributing these 5 million into the 7 departments. How do I do that? There were a few suggestions. What I thought was to link it to the base pay, the total base pay of that department. Now say the 50 employees, we say average, we say 1 lakh. So say 1.5 lakhs. So the total would be what? 50 employees, 7.5 million is the total base salary. Now just, if you have a piece of paper, you can just do the calculation with me because I'm doing mentally. So you can just get something on paper. So the story is like this. Number of employees, 50. Number of departments, say 7. Total amount to be disbursed, 5 million. Next is total base salary, 7.5 million. Then I calculated each department, what is the base pay total. So department A, we say had a total of 2 million base pay. Next had say 5 lakhs. Other one 1 million. Likewise, different departments have different totals in terms of base salary. So if the total is 7.5 million and department C has 1.5 million as the total base salary, which means 20% of the base salary is in that department. Got it? So likewise, I can calculate the percentage out of the total base salary. What is the base salary of that department? So it can be 5%, 10%, 20%, different percentages. Then it was not difficult for me to distribute the amount to that department. Right? Which means, okay, the total was 5 million. If department A is having 20% of the total base salaries, then I allocate 20% of 5 million, which is 1 million, to that department. Then the second department, maybe they had 5% of the total base salary. So it received 5% of 5 million, that is 5 lakhs. So likewise, it was distributed. So now I know the 7 departments have fixed total to be disbursed among its departmental members. First step. Now the second step. Now I know how much department A will get? 1 million. And department A has 8 employees. Right? And the 8 employees have different base salaries, which is, of course, linked to their scope of work and experience. That is how they have got to that level. And their performers. It can be A, B, C, D, whatever. So now I wanted to come up with a system, a fair system, where that 1 million can be distributed among these 8 employees, considering those two, base salaries and level of performance. Of course, performance, there's a score, either 70%, 60%, 80%, whatever. So what I did was, because I wanted to consider both those elements when we are distributing, I multiplied the base salary and the performance percentage score. Say there was this employee A, employee X, receiving, we say 250,000 base salary, performance 70%. So 250,000 into 70%. You get 175,000. Then there's another employee who's getting 100,000 base salary, 95% performance, excellent. So you multiply 100 by 95. So you get 95,000. So likewise, you multiply the base salary with the performance percentage. You get a number, a figure. Right? Then you calculate that figure for the 8 employees and add it up. And you get a figure, the total. Then I can calculate the percentage. Employee A, who had 250,000, performance 70%, would get out of the total. Right? Say 15%. Next one will get 8%. Next one will get 12%. So now you calculate, multiply those two, get a figure, add it up, the whole department total index, and each employee, what is the percentage of their index score. Then I use that percentage to distribute that 1 million bonus the department has. Which means employees with higher base salary will get a higher bonus. Yes, because my argument was, for someone to have a higher base salary, it meant that they were doing a job with a larger scope, higher responsibilities, higher educational requirements. So they have to get something higher because they have invested in their job previously. Second component or the factor is performance. Just because you are doing a high responsibility job, you should not get automatically the highest bonus. You have to perform as well. So someone who is slightly lower in terms of responsibilities but doing a much better job might get a higher bonus than the manager. Again, I could justify my decision. So then we got the percentage and distributed the departmental total piece of cake among these 8 employees. So that is how we did that. So I'm just going to give you an example of how one particular thing was done. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it was very transparent and it had procedural justice. But after a couple of years of implementing, there was a bit of a resistance from the Chinese, few of the Chinese managers saying that this person is getting, these 2 individuals are getting 25% of the entire bonus. That is unfair. Whereas these employees, these 10 employees are only getting 5% of the total bonus. Unfair. That was the argument. But my counter argument was, how did they get that high bonus? One, they are already doing a very difficult job in terms of responsibility and mental effort and whatnot, and they are performing well. So don't you think those two criteria gives them the right to have a very high percentage of the entire bonus? That's my argument. We are still arguing on that. So that is procedural justice. Then the distributive justice is the outcome of the process. Now, in the example I quoted, the Chinese management is very much concerned about the distributive justice. If A get, say, 2 lakhs in bonus and B get 20,000 in bonus, they are upset. They don't want to have a big range. Again, coming from a very communist kind of thinking, where things have to be equal. So they want to minimize the difference. If the maximum was 120,000, minimum was 90,000, they would have been very happy. But when the maximum is 250,000, minimum is 25,000, they are very unhappy. Because the distributive justice, they are very worried about. But for me, as long as you adapt to a particular procedure, system which can be explained with some arguments, whatever the outcome is not that critical because we have followed a particular procedure. So when you are trying to develop new systems or new procedures, always try to think of mainly procedural justice. What is the process you are trying to adopt? If you can justify that, if you have adequate positive arguments to support your decision, you are good to go. End result will be decided on the factors you considered in the calculation. So if someone is not performing well, he's getting a less bonus. So what? So that is the argument. So the source of fairness is something that you need to consider. Pay procedures more likely to be viewed as fair if they are consistently applied to all employees. So it's the same process or same procedure. And again, there was this issue at the beginning of COVID, when there was no work, absolute lockdown. So the finance department had received a communique from head office to reduce the employee cost by 20%. That's the must. So they were looking at all possible ways to reduce the cost. So the first thing to go was the training and development, then the welfare went out, and then the allowances that we were enjoying. So there were two departments, marketing and investment, who were getting higher salaries because they were given more allowances. And the rest of us, mainly the salary, only small amount in allowances. So when the COVID hit, so they thought, okay, we remove the allowances. Then what happened? Some employees in the investment department, it was a 40% cut in their total earnings. So they were very upset. And every employee had at least 2-3% of allowance. So everybody suffered a reduction. Then these two departments made a case against this cut, and then I got the instruction to pay back the allowances for these two departments. Guess what I said? Coming from the MD, I said, no way. You can't do that. If you are going to reimburse or pay back the allowances, it has to be for all employees. Now, are you saying that the company can survive with these two departments? Don't you think finance is needed, HR is needed, IT is needed? But if all these employees leave, can these two departments do their job? They can't. So I totally opposed that. Actually, it went on for a few weeks. Fierce arguments and almost choral kind of thing and everything. But at the end of the day, we decided, okay, we'll pay back a certain amount of the allowance for everybody to be happy. So the procedure is likely to be viewed as fair if it is consistently applied to all employees. Sometimes we have benefits applied to executives, not the non-executives. We have certain benefits applicable to confirmed employees, not probationers. The staff gets, but not trainees, things like that. So you can't justify those things as long as they are doing the same job. Then another very important factor is employee participation. So all these decisions needs to be made through a committee which has representation from all the departments at least. Then each participant in that committee will have a chance to voice their opinion. What are their specific grievances? How would they feel? So then the procedure is more likely to be accepted. Appeals procedure is available. The whole thing would be very much fair if you have an option. If you feel that you have been victimized or you have been mistreated, you can appeal. If the employees know that a certain decision taken by the management can be challenged by at a different forum, then they would see the entire process to be fair. And of course, the accuracy of the data. If you make decisions based on data which is inaccurate. Now, I told you, if I use the score given by different managers in a very across the board, comparative to each other, it will not be accurate. So I had to come up with a different method. So that is why we say always, whatever the data that is used for these kind of decisions have to be accurate. Right. So we will take the formal break for 20 minutes. It's 9:40 and we'll start at 10. Okay. Come back. So let's move on. There are a few slides, and after that, we'll do that discussion activity. So the strategic choices, as I said, there are different strategic choices, but we will focus on two. Whether to go for egalitarian or hierarchical, or loosely coupled or structured. Right. So egalitarian structures send the message that all employees are valued equally. So here what will happen is the pay differentials are less. The number of levels are less. So what's the message you are sending? That all are equal. Advantages. Fewer levels and smaller differentials between adjacent levels and between highest and lowest paid workers. If you take the CEO and the office assistant, the difference is less. But there are disadvantages. Why? What we call the averageism. That everyone is clustered together. It brings to light that equal treatment can mean more knowledgeable employees feel underpaid. So when you are trying to bring all those levels clustered close together, even the employees with very high levels of skill and knowledge, they might feel okay. Even those with very less knowledge and competencies are paid almost similar salaries. So they might feel that their knowledge, their expertise is undervalued or underpaid. Hierarchical structures, on the other hand, send the message that the organization values the differences in work content, individual skills, contributions, and they value the differences. So they want to highlight or give prominence to these differences. So that's the difference between egalitarian and hierarchical. So if you look at the two, in comparison, hierarchical, there'll be many levels, large differentials, person or the job is focused, yes, and there's a closer fit to the individual performance and opportunities for promotion. Whereas egalitarian, there are less levels, small differentials, loose fit. So you focus on the teams and there's equal treatment and cooperation will be highlighted. Then if you look at the, this is our discussion point. So then we have the layered and delayered. So this is how we convert a hierarchical structure into an egalitarian structure. In a hierarchical one, there are 8 levels, but in the egalitarian one, they have been condensed into 3 levels. So this is one way of delayering, which can facilitate the egalitarian structure. Then the second strategic choice is between tailored versus loosely coupled. What is this? Tailored is well-designed jobs with detailed steps and tasks, so the job descriptions are precise. Very small pay differentials, because even the slight difference in the job is highlighted in the job description. So you can identify, this is the executive, this is the senior executive. They have well-developed detailed job descriptions, they can be differentiated. Suits low-cost, customer-focused business strategies. McDonald's, Walmart, and you can think of similar local examples to that. Whereas loosely coupled, pay structure loosely linked to the organization in order to facilitate constant change. Things are changing. So if you have very detailed job descriptions and tight job categories, it's difficult to change rapidly. So if you are in an industry where there's constant change, you have to go for loosely coupled. Suits business strategy that requires constant innovation. So those 3 main types, cost, customer, innovation. So for cost and customer, tailored. For innovation, loosely coupled. So we'll get back to these 2 after we finish these few slides and get into the activity. Time? Yeah, we have time. So what are the positive consequences of internally aligned pay structure? Now, as I said, if you link clearly the pay structure to the job scope or the job evaluation and the qualification experience, then employees would want to undertake training. As an example I gave, the quantity survey who wanted to do the degree and now he's doing the master's. So it will facilitate employees or it will encourage employees to undertake training. And it will increase their experience because they'll be required to expand their scope of work. And to do that, they have to acquire experience. They would be willing to work on secondment assignments. They might want to spend a couple of weeks in a different department to get the experience so that they can enhance their scope. So at the end of the day, when you have employees with more experience, a wider array of experience, at the end of the day, the company would benefit. And of course, it would reduce turnover. Employees would want to stay. Facilitate career progression. Because you have a pay structure which is linked to different grades and you have clearly identified the criteria for each grade. And when they achieve those grades, they would progress in their careers. And of course, performance. Now, your pay structure, as we have discussed in the previous lectures, needs to have 2 elements, the fixed element and the variable element. The variable element, which we have a separate session on, called the merit-based pay, is based on their output, based on their performance. So in order to get more of the variable component of the pay, the employees would want to contribute more, would want to work harder. So this kind of a system would facilitate performance. Then it will reduce the pay-related grievances and pay-related work stoppage, like strike actions. Because the system, there's procedural justice, and the process has been communicated and is transparent, and different departments and different levels of employees have been part of the discussion team, so they accept it. So there'll be less grievances and stoppages. So these are the positives that you can have. And also, having a well-designed and, of course, a well-accepted pay structure would lead to better organizational performance. How? The employees will remain with the organization because they know that this organization has a very acceptable and a fair system. And if I have any problems, there's a way I can go and make an appeal. So they are happy with because whatever said and done, the compensation is the main part of a person's decision to remain. Okay, have all these things like communication and the culture and the camaraderie, like we discussed in that great workplace elements, those things are there. But compensation still is a major deciding factor for a person to remain. So when the compensation systems are properly in place, the employees would remain. And the experience and training would increase because they know if they get more training, more qualifications, more experience, they can get more the better salaries, so they will do that. Responsibilities, when the job scope increases, they are entitled for, they are eligible for promotion, so they will do that. And they will cooperate with each other because teamwork is appreciated or acknowledged. And there'll be better relationship with the supervisors. You know that there's a system, transparent system, and objective measurement. All these things would improve the relationship between an employee and the supervisors. Employees' attitude about the fairness of the pay structure affect their work behavior. The turnover, grievances, all these work behaviors are affected by the employee's attitude about the fairness. Now, the key point is their attitude about the fairness. You can have a very fair system, but unless it is communicated properly, unless it is transparent adequately, the employees will not feel the fairness. So it's one thing to have a very fair and just system. It's also important, equally important, to communicate that properly so that the employees know what this is all about and they will develop a positive attitude. Final slide. So what evidence do we have regarding the internal structures? So first is what we call the tournament theory. It addresses the motivation and performance. Structures with greater differences between lower levels and top levels have more positive effect on motivation and performance than smaller differences. Now, if you are familiar with these highly paid sports like tennis, golf, motor racing. So if you look at the difference between the first and the second place, is huge. More than double sometimes. So which means there's always that added motivation to move from 2 to 1. Being second is not good. I want to be first because the differential is huge. So that is tournament theory. So when there are higher differentials, greater differentials, there will be a positive motivation effect on performance than smaller differentials. The bigger the price for getting to the next level, the greater the motivational impact of the structure. Now, say you are in C, and to get to B, you have to do a degree or do a master's, we'll say. And the pay difference is 20,000 rupees a month. So, will you be motivated to spend 2.5 years or 3 years to get a master's to get 20,000 more in terms of salary per month? If it is 200,000, definitely you will put your effort to do the master's, because in 2 months, your investment is recovered. The bigger the price for getting next level, the greater the motivation. Research supporting hierarchical structures typically involves situations where need for cooperation among individuals is less. So the tournament theory would support the hierarchical structure, right? The difference, not the egalitarian. So research support that hierarchical structure works better in an organization where cooperation between individuals is low. They can work independently. In that situation, a hierarchical structure would really work because of the tournament theory. It does not directly address turnover, again, research finding. Right. Equity theory. It addresses fairness. Research suggests that employees judge fairness by multiple comparisons. What they receive against the effort, input, output, comparing with similar jobs, comparing with the same employer, other departments, and comparing with external job levels. So you always compare this, what you get, with your own input, output, with your fellow colleagues, other departments, other companies. And both, so whenever they feel there's an issue with equity, then they would have a grievance. So that's what the equity theory says. There has to be a match between the effort and the output and the comparisons between other referent points. Both overpayment equity and underpayment inequity lead to reduced productivity. What is overpayment inequity? You feel lucky. Oh, I got this great break. I'm earning much more than I deserve. So you feel guilty. Productivity drops. Underpayment inequity. You feel anger or frustration. I put so much of effort. This is what I'm getting. Again, it affects productivity. So these two theories, I've shared 2 articles. We might not have time to go through those 2 articles, but I think 3 articles. One a journal article and through some notes on tournament theory and equity theory. So you read them and get some understanding. More evidence. Impact of internal structures depend on the context in which they operate, related to other HR functions. More hierarchical structures are related to greater performance when the workflow depends on individual contributors. Like consulting and law practices where they are working separately. Whereas more egalitarian structures are related to greater performance when close collaboration is needed. Now, for example, firefighting or rescue squads. Each one, even the driver, has to do his part. So then, more egalitarian structure would work there. Sorry. High performers quit less under more hierarchical structures. Now, higher performers under hierarchical systems. Big gap. When pay is based on performance, they quit less. When people have knowledge of the structure, they know what the structure is, the turnover is less. Impact of any internal structure on organizational performance is affected by other dimensions, like comparative pay levels, how competitive you are in the market, your contribution, your performance level, the merit base, and employees' knowledge. That is how you manage your pay system. So, as you can see, the first element is the internal alignment. The impact of internal alignment is affected by the other 3 dimensions. is affected by the external competitiveness, individual contribution, and the management. So all four aspects are linked together. So that's about it. Now let's move on to the discussion. So I will share in the WhatsApp group the 2 slides on the egalitarian and the loosely coupled structures. Just a minute. So I have given a very brief explanation of what these 2 strategic choices are: egalitarian and hierarchical, tailored and loosely coupled. So how many? There are about 30 participants, right? Yeah. So I will divide you into 4 groups, and group 1 and 3. Breakout room 1 and 3, right? Remember, breakout room 1 and 3 would take the first one. That is the choice between egalitarian versus hierarchical. Right? Then breakout room 2 and 4 would take the strategy decision between tailored versus loosely coupled. Right? So this is what you have to do. You have to get into the group and identify one industry represented by a particular member in the team, right? So you can't talk about all the industries the 7, 8 members are in, but you select one industry. It can be apparel, it can be banking, it can be insurance, it can be military. Take one, right? And then discuss the positives and the negatives for that particular industry, not in general, okay? So I want to be very practical here, very focused here. So for that selected industry, what are the positives and negatives of the egalitarian? What's the positives and negatives of a hierarchical for groups 1 and 3? For groups 2 and 4, in that selected industry, what are the positives and negatives of a tailored? What are the positives and negatives of a loosely coupled? Okay, are you clear? What you have to do? So I have created the groups, and hope all of you have received the two slides on WhatsApp. So again, group 1 and 3 will work on whether hierarchical or egalitarian, and group 2 and 4 will work on whether tailored or loosely coupled. Select one industry from among the members and discuss the positives and negatives of that particular industry with regard to these choices. Okay, so it's 11:23. Since there are only 4 groups, we can go till about 10:45. So you have 20 minutes. So we'll go till about 10:45 for the discussion. Now I want you to be very specific, right? Identify clearly what's the industry, what are the positives and negatives of 2. So you have to identify 4 areas, right? Each of the groups will have a choice between 2 strategy choice. What are the positives of this, negatives of this? What are the positives of this and negatives of this? And I want you to think very focused for a particular industry with examples. Okay. Now, that is exactly how I am going to face my questions in the question paper as well. Very specific. So you have to think very focused. Okay. I'm going to open the breakout rooms now. We'll get back at 10:45.